Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Welcome to The Ray Taylor Show, where I bring you the reviews on the latest movies and TV shows, as well as classic and foreign films. I'm your host, Ray Taylor, and on this podcast, I'll be talking about all things film and television. Whether you're looking for a new show to binge or want to know if that blockbuster is worth the trip to the theater, or just want to hear my thoughts on a classic or foreign film, I've got you covered. So join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for new episodes, and let's dive into the world of film and television together. On this episode, I am talking about the new Apple TV Plus exclusive film, Tetris. Came out this year, 2023, directed by John S. Baird, written by Noah Pink, and stars Taron Egerton. The story of how one of the world's most popular video games found its way to players around the globe. Businessman Hank Rogers and Tetris inventor Alexei Pojitnov join forces in the USSR, risking it all to bring Tetris to the masses. This was a movie that I was very surprised that I enjoyed. I heard some negative reviews, some kind of mixed reviews, I guess you could say. So either way, my expectations for this movie were already pretty low. Also, the fact that it's a video based on like a video game, and so anyway, the story is interesting. I do have a few criticisms, but overall, I surprisingly thought it was a lot of fun. It's worth a watch. I wouldn't say it's worth signing up for Apple TV Plus necessarily, unless you also want to binge the Ted Lasso show, which is amazing. But if you have Apple TV Plus and looking for something fun to watch, want a fun thriller type of a movie, kind of a lighthearted thriller in some ways, you can't go wrong with this movie. Despite I have a few issues, but mostly I enjoyed this movie, which was very surprising. Very surprising. My first reaction to seeing that they made a Tetris movie was disgust, right? The film industry is so desperate to turn every piece of IP into a movie, like even board games like Battleship or even Jenga. I didn't mind the second Jenga movie by Mike Flanagan, but they are really, really reaching for a lot of these movies that are being released, whether they're reboots, remakes, sequels. It's mind-boggling, the movies that are being made. So seeing Tetris was like, how are they going to do? Like, the game, there's no narrative to the game of Tetris. But, of course, it's a movie about how Tetris came about, which apparently is a very interesting story. It is a game that was developed in Russia and then kind of was licensed by Nintendo eventually. Spoilers for history, for real life, if you don't know that Tetris came on Game Boys. Then, or even watched, if you missed the trailer, which, I don't like trailers, but, it's definitely a piece of history that I would imagine people would know. Unless, I guess you're of a certain age, maybe you probably wouldn't know. Maybe you don't even know what Tetris is. But knowing the film industry and where things are going, was not at all excited or interested in watching this before knowing kind of a little bit about the story of Tetris and how it came about. But the fact that it was on Apple TV, like an Apple TV exclusive, kind of made me sad, because there's been a few hits, I would say. Coda was pretty good, got some awards. I loved Macbeth. I thought that was a gorgeous film. And I'm sure there are other stuff, Ted Lasso. They have a few things here or there, but you don't really think of Apple TV Plus. I don't really think of Apple TV Plus as a streaming service that is really knocking it out of the park with their movies, or maybe a couple shows. There are a few shows that are good, but So, and I felt bad. I like Apple products. I want them to do good. I want more good movies. But since I had the service, I figured, why not give it a shot? And I heard a few reviews, kind of mixed, so my expectations were already pretty low. The reviews that I listened to didn't really change that. Just knowing that it's based on a video game and the video game it's based on. But in those reviews, I realized that the story kind of interesting about Tetris. So I didn't go into this movie as blind as I prefer to go into movies, because I wasn't expecting to watch this or review it. But after hearing the reviews, after learning a little bit about this history, the story of this game and how it came about, I figured, yeah, it seems like an interesting thing. Let's see what they did. Let's see. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to watch it, and we'll see. And I got to say, it was a lot of fun when I watched it. I was surprised. I mean, yeah, my expectations were low. This isn't like some Academy Award winning film. This isn't like some mind-blowing movie on any level. But it is fun. I think it's well made. I think it's well acted. I mean, I didn't really feel there were any issues necessarily. Maybe a couple issues with the kind of graphics that are used in this and how they were used in this, which I'll get into later. But overall, it's, it was a fun movie. Obviously, this movie's based on true events, and going into any movie that's based on true events, you have to take with a grain of salt. I don't know how. Obviously, there's most likely many events and things that happen in this that probably didn't happen or exaggerated, which is fine. I don't watch movies for a history lesson. There's probably a bunch of documentaries about Tetris that would fill in those gaps or scratch that itch if I want to, which I do kind of want to know the actual story, the nitty-gritty, and would be interesting to see how closely this movie depicts the events that were true to life. Because on paper, this idea is boring. It's a movie about Tetris, but thankfully, the movie is heightened, kind of turned into a thriller, which is fun, right? Kind of an espionage type of a thing. There's spying. There's deals going down. There's like a kind of love triangle as far as people wanting the rights to this game. The USSR during this time in history is also going through a big change, or about to go through a big change of its own. So there are a lot of moving pieces in this, but at no point did I feel the movie was like confusing or trying overstuffed in any way. Like, they're really able to focus it on the main aspects of the story, while other things are kind of going on. And while those things are going on, it informs how certain characters are acting. So I appreciate it. I thought it was a well-made movie, well acted, very fun. They turned it into a very fun movie. And I would say, there's some action moments as well, which is kind of fun too. And it's kind of elevated in a way, kind of goofy, almost like Weird Al in some ways. I mean, clearly not nearly as over the top fabricated as the Al Yankovic story was, but still kind of has that similar type of vibe where that some of these events are exaggerated a bit. And maybe not, and clearly not as much, I'm sure, as the Weird Al movie was, but it has that vibe. Also, kind of, there are moments where it has almost like an 8-bit Scott Pilgrim type of vibe, which I almost wish it leaned into that more, or went away from it. It feels like it's riding a line where it is, but it's not, and it doesn't necessarily fit in a lot of the ways it's used. But a very peppy movie in tone, right? You follow this guy, Taron Egerton's character, who's passionate about what he does, which, sure, I'm going to like a movie where the lead character is passionate about what he's doing. He's passionate about this game, Tetris. He loves this game. He has a lot of respect for the person who developed this game, right? And him contrasted with the other people involved, it strikes an interesting balance. They approach this challenge from very different ways, right? And he's trying to make something of himself for himself and his family, while also trying to honor the creator of the game, right? He's a good guy trying to do a good thing, and he's put in this very difficult position to make that thing happen. In some ways, kind of like a pursuit of happiness, right? Not necessarily he's living on the streets with his kid, but he does have a family. He does sacrifice a lot to try and make this thing happen. So there's stakes involved, you know? And I'm not just talking about New York Strip or Porterhouse. There's some real life stakes involved. And all the while, like I said, the USSR, who is going through its own big changes and also trying to, which because of that, people involved on that side of the deal are trying to cut corners and, you know, get rich. Like this game basically provided a lot of people with the opportunity to potentially get rich. And when something is falling apart like the USSR was, there's a lot of people, you know, trying to make moves because their position in life is going to be changing, right? And like I said, because of that, there is a bit of a love triangle in ways between the Japanese video game company, Bulletproof Games, I think, Bulletproof Video Games, that Taron Egerton's character, Hank, works for, as well as a UK media company that is like a bigger, well-established type of a media company. So it's like an underdog story. It's a bit of a love triangle. These two companies are competing for this game. So it has a lot of interesting dynamics, right? And as I said, there is spying, there's backstabbing, there are cons, there's a fun car chase, right? All in all, I mostly enjoyed this movie. I would say it's a solid B. If I had to give it a grade, I should probably, talking about movies as much as I do, I should probably come up with some kind of ranking system. It's always difficult to rank movies because if I'm watching, like, later on in the week, I'm going to be ranking Pauly Shore movies. And it's like, I can't, like, give one of those movies that's my favorite an A, because it's not like comparable to, like, an epic movie. It's not like Gandhi, right? So it's weird. It's a weird kind of curve that would be graded on. But I would say, this is a solid B minus, maybe. It's a solid movie. Let's take a quick break from this episode because I want to talk about, are you looking to add some unique and expressive artwork to your home, office, or wardrobe? Look no further than the Many Faces series by Ray Taylor. That's me. These abstract paintings on paper explore the endless possibilities of the human face, capturing unique expressions of emotion, mood, tone, and energy in just a few minimal features. Now you can bring these stunning and thought-provoking pieces into your own space with high-quality prints and t-shirts, featuring designs from the Many Faces series. Or take home a one-of-a-kind original piece for your collection. Don't miss out on this opportunity to add some original and expressive artwork to your home, office, or wardrobe. Head on over to InspiredDisorder.com to browse and purchase original artworks, prints, and t-shirts from the Many Faces series today. And now, back to the show. And like I said, the only thing I had a problem with at all was the graphics, which they use 8-bit graphics, right, to do between, like, cuts between scenes, between many scenes, which makes sense, Nintendo is part of this whole thing. Tetris and Mario and all those games at the time were 8-bit. So it makes sense that they would use 8-bit graphics. But considering a lot of like the establishing shots of this movie between scenes when these graphics are used, is a lot of it takes place in the USSR, where the USSR, not the most lively, colorful, vibrant, interesting forms and colors and shapes going on in their cities. The buildings were these things, very plain, very monotone. So seeing those types of scenes in pixel form, kind of very, very underwhelming. It just basically looks like it doesn't. There's some scenes where it works out. Like there's a few scenes where it shows where Hank's house is in, I think Hong Kong, where they live, where there's color and it like looks like a thing, versus a lot of the establishing shots in the USSR where they have these 8-bit graphics. It's just like different shades of gray, and like the camera's moving, so you see the pixel. It just doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. It just kind of looks like a mess. But there are times when it works. And then there are like a couple scenes where like objects in the scene get pixelated, which felt more like a Scott Pilgrim type of a use. Except for Scott Pilgrim, they leaned all the way into that type of a look, really making it feel like a video game come to life. Where the moments where objects turn pixelated, where it's not just between scenes in the movie, it doesn't really fit. Like, it looks cool, but it's the only time in the movie where they do it that I can remember, and it just doesn't fit. So it's like I wished they would either have leaned into that more, maybe leaned into the heightened, make it a little bit goofier, just a little bit. Doesn't have to be wacky. Find some more interesting scenes to depict in pixel form. And then, maybe have the visuals throughout the movie kind of come in, like objects or just blocks kind of filling in a wall. Like, there's a lot of visual things they could have added to this that would have made the scene where they actually use it in the scene for objects to turn pixelated would have made more sense. It would have fit, versus kind of feeling out of place. Or either lean into it or go completely away from it. Just make this thing grounded and real. Maybe have some pixelated stuff for like the intro, outro of the movie, but just kind of lean away from it altogether. And it's a movie, which I think is kind of a plus for this movie. It's a movie that made me want to know more about the story. Obviously, movie based on true events, not going to have all the real things. Going to be heightened. They're going to change things to make them more interesting for film. So it definitely made me want to, I'm sure there's documentaries, look into documentaries to see what the real story is. Because I'm sure a documentary about this subject would be just as interesting in its own way. But as far as a movie about Tetris, I mean, it was way better than it had any like need to be. Like, it was way better than I thought it would be. Also, I thought there would be more Tetris music. Now, maybe they did use Tetris music in a way, and I just didn't notice it. Could have been. But I was really expecting. I mean, they're using the pixelated stuff, which makes sense, whatever. But it for sure would have made sense to have a lot of that Tetris music as the score. And maybe they were, and I just didn't notice it. I mean, this movie also inspired me to download Tetris, and once I downloaded it, it's like, I'm not going to play Tetris. I liked Tetris growing up. Of course, everybody played it. If you had a Game Boy, of course, it came with the Game Boy. You people played. I played Tetris. I liked Tetris as a kid, but I can't get into any games. Like I've tried getting into games on my phone, and it's just not. I'm just not that person anymore. The only game I can play on my phone is Call of Duty Mobile, and that I have a controller for, and that I only play here and there. Right? It's kind of a nice break. The matches only take about 20, 30 minutes, so I'm like in and out. I'm not wasting a bunch of time, which is kind of one of the reasons I stopped playing video games over a decade ago. It's just if I'm playing it, it's just going to suck up all of my time and I can't get anything done. If I had a day job and I wasn't actually trying to exist doing these things like art and podcasting, then I would probably, as a way to escape the reality of going to a day job, I would probably get into video games again. But as it stands now, specifically even handheld games, like maybe if the Restrict Act passes, they ban some social media apps and all that's left is like Instagram, I'll probably, as a means for something to do on my phone, do that instead of to avoid social media stuff. But either way, I want to talk about spoilers. There's a few aspects of this movie that I want to talk about that might be considered spoilers. So I do want to get into spoilers. So let's get into spoilers. Let's do that, and then be done with this review. Which it's surprising how it's just a fun movie, and I can understand. There's definitely one of the big criticisms was like people wanting it, knowing the story of Tetris, and wanting this to be grounded in that reality of a very interesting story, which I would feel is similar to people who have read or watched movies based on books, where they prefer the book. It's like you consumed the in-depth version of that story, so to see a theatrical take on that probably would leave you wanting more. So I get that. So it's prefer going movie then documentary, or movie then although books, come on, who's reading? I've tried. That's another thing. I can't get into games on my phone. It's just as hard for me to get into reading books. I just can't. It's so weird how things I used to do a lot of, I just can't get into anymore. So a lot of this movie, spoilers. So a lot of this movie is basically them trying to get the rights to this game, right? Game's developed by a guy in Russia, Alexei. Everybody's addicted. They show how, he developed this thing, and it wasn't like the way it was distributed was on floppy disk, like just, similar in a lot of ways to how South Park started, where the creators of South Park made the first episode, right, just a one-off, and it spread by people before they ever got a TV deal, and this is way before the internet, and it just spread on VHS tapes. People would copy it on VHS tapes, and it just spread that way. Very similar to the game of Tetris, where it was just kind of people getting into it, copying it for other people to check out, right? That first media, whether it's floppy disks or VHS tapes, that first time people could actually copy media and share it as a way to distribute things. So this game starts off in a very similar way. And the whole thing is like this guy, like somebody from the UK works for like kind of a freelance guy, I guess, to find new games to sell to companies, comes across this game Tetris, and they go through the process of trying to get the rights and dealing with people who aren't honest, people who are trying to scam other people, all of the kind of things that are going on behind the scenes of this movie makes it a massive mess of trying. It really kind of stressed me out. Thinking about the logistics involved getting the rights and all the contracts just really stressed me out. It's just the idea of having to license a thing specifically for different formats, right? They had to get the licensing for desktop, different than arcade, different than handheld, like different than console, right? All of these kind of very specific licensing agreements that are needed. It's just like so it just like it gives me a headache thinking about it. And then on top of that, how messy everything was in the USSR at the time is just like, get out of here. Get out of here. And like I said earlier, the contrast between Hank Rogers, our main character played by Taron Egerton, and Kevin Maxwell, who's the son of the owner of the UK media company, where Kevin is like this spoiled brat, right? He's never had to do anything on his own. He grew up wealthy. His dad created the business or whatever, however it started. But this kid, Kevin, never did anything. And every time he's introduced to somebody, he demands that they call him Mr. Maxwell. They want to call him Kevin. He's like, you can call me Mr. Maxwell. Like, that is the type of character he is. Doesn't care about these games. Doesn't have any idea how deals work. And then on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, you have Hank Rogers, who's passionate about the games, who actually knows how to code, who has respect for and wants to honor the creator of the game. Like, he's trying to do best for his family, coming from nothing. He's the underdog in this story, right? And insisting people call him Hank instead of when they try and call him Mr. Rogers, which is kind of funny that his Mr. Rogers was spoken so many times. And asked, despite, I mean, considering his name is Mr. Rogers, at the end of this movie, he, in many ways, asks Alexei to be his neighbor. So it kind of works out, I guess. But the contrast between Kevin Maxwell and Hank Rogers is a great contrast between completely different, like, tones and types of people. Right? Kevin doesn't care. He's just spoiled rich kid. He's never had to do anything. Expects everyone to bow down to him. Right? He's not even using his money. Like, it's his dad's money. It's his dad's company. Right? So he has nothing really to lose. He has no respect for anything or anyone. Right? And ultimately, his dad is the one making all the deals anyway, which is kind of hilarious. That, like, his son's going over, like, it's, in many ways, it's like his dad teaching his son how to ride a bike, right? And dad's, like, chasing behind him, still got his hand on the seat, but this guy thinks he's Lance Armstrong, right? That's what Kevin Maxwell's like. Like, he thinks he's, like, some gold star negotiator type of a guy, but meanwhile, he's not. His dad is doing all of the actual negotiations. But Kevin's going in there like he's the shit. Let's take a quick break right now to talk about, are you a fan of original artwork and live events? Look no further than the Many Faces series by Ray Taylor and the weekly live stream over at youtube.com/Inspired Disorder. This ongoing series explores the endless possibilities of the human face through abstract ink paintings on paper, capturing unique expressions of emotion, mood, tone, and energy in just a few minimal features. Join me every Thursday at 4:20 Pacific Time as I paint live. Follow the Many Faces series and discover the endless possibilities of the human face. Don't miss out on this opportunity to be part of the action and own a piece of original artwork by me, Ray Taylor. Head to youtube.com/Inspired Disorder every Thursday to catch the live stream, and visit inspireddisorder.com to browse and purchase the Many Faces artwork. And now, let's get back to the show. Would have loved something, obviously we see at the end of this movie, as many movies based on true events, we see pictures of all the people, the real people. We get little blurbs about what happened to the different people after this movie takes place, and things don't go well for him or his company. So it's, I guess, kind of a little bit of karmic comeback after this movie. But nose hair. versus Hank, who's passionate about computer games, passionate about coding, has a lot of respect for Alexei, and has everything to lose, sacrificing everything, sacrificing his house, who he has a wife and a kid, right? He's like putting everything on the line. This means everything to him. Where Kevin, it doesn't mean anything to him. It's just like he wants the pat on the back. He like wants to prove his daddy that he can make a deal on his own, which he's not. And even with those two guys both going at the deal, there's still so many other things going on, right? Just like a house of cards, right? So many things have to go right for this to work out. And just effortlessly, everything can fall apart. And you see there's a great scene where Hank and Alexei kind of bond over programming, right? He goes over to Alexei's house. His wife kind of grills him. But I think pretty quickly find out that Hank is the real deal. And he's like a genuine person. And they bond, they geek out over, they literally sit down to program and to improve his version of Tetris that is like just the really bare bones version of Tetris where like the blocks were just two parentheses back to back or two brackets back to back, right? And they're like, oh, like the original version, only one line of bricks would disappear when you lined them up, even if you had 3 rows. And he's like, could we do more? He's like, we should do up to 4, right? Which I don't know how true that is. It would. I can't imagine playing Tetris and you like have, 4 rows of bricks and you put that straight brick down and only one line disappearing. It's like, well, what do you do then? Then you just have 3 bricks on the bottom, and it's just like it would make the game. It's like kind of an improvement that seemed pretty obvious to make. But there's a lot of respect there, which I really enjoy. And the end of the film, you get to see pictures, which obviously Taron Egerton, way more, like all these actors, even like the ugliest actor in this movie is like far more attractive than the nerds involved in getting these deals done. Unlike so many movies that show pictures of the actual people involved, where it's surprising to see how accurately the casting is. Whoa, they look alike. This one, no, not at all. Not at all. But also cool to see that, like, after this, they teamed up. Like I said, he asked him to be his neighbor, as Mr. Rogers does. And Alexei's like, sure, I'll bring my family. And they go to San Francisco and they develop. And now Hank's daughter runs the Tetris company. It's great. Kind of like a great end, a great story, great kind of epilogue to the whole movie. Fun car chase. And this is the scene where you see things get pixelated, where you see, like, as they're driving and they're bumping into cars on the street, the cars get pixelated. So kind of a very similar to Scott Pilgrim-y thing, which is cool, but feels out of place with the rest of the movie where, I mean, one, it's the only, like, action set piece in this movie, which is fine. Shouldn't be that many action set pieces. Shouldn't be, like, a lot of hand-to-hand combat in a movie about Tetris necessarily. But, like, they could have had those details and those flourishes in other places, so it's not just when they're in a car, which doesn't make any sense. It almost feels like in the car, it almost feels like they're hallucinating, right? Like the car chase isn't real because things are kind of getting pixelated, which maybe it does that because that is a scene that was fictionalized. But still, add it to other stuff, right? Add it to other stuff. Have it blend in other scenes. Set it up. Right? Which gives it a Scott Pilgrim-y vibe, but Scott Pilgrim obviously does it exponentially better. I don't think there's very few movies that can harness that kind of visual style, that over-the-top visual style in the way Scott Pilgrim did. But overall, fun story, right? There's the whole, everything being bugged in the USSR, the translator that he had actually being somebody that works for them, how he's kind of set up. All of those things I enjoyed, despite the fact that they were kind of fun, like more on the fun side of the spectrum than grounded side, which I'm fine with. It's a movie about Tetris. It's perfectly fine to have a little bit of levity, have a little bit of like peppiness to it. So I appreciated it. I enjoyed this movie, right? The fact when I noticed, like after I watched this movie and I saw a trailer for this movie and saw that it was rated R, I was like, the most mind blown I was in regards to this movie was finding out that this movie is rated R. Because there's no nudity, there's no sex, there's no violence. I think a person gets punched. There is a mild, like, cat fight that goes on at one point in the UK office. But I was like, how? Like, it had to be for language, which I thought, if a movie gets rated R for language, you would think after watching that movie, you would remember all of the language that was clearly the reason for being rated R. So I actually had to Google. It's like, why is the Tetris movie rated R? And come to find out, they used the F word like 30 times. Didn't notice it at all. Not at all. But, I don't look for that. I'm 42. What do I care? What the fuck do I care? It's so fucking stupid. The MPAA is just like mind-numbingly sad and shouldn't exist, and like, or should exist in a very different kind of a way than the way the MPAA exists. This group of like anonymous people that just randomly tell directors how they should edit their films in order to get a certain rating to make them feel better about it. It's absurd. It's absurd. But insane that this movie was... they could have easily made this movie not rated R. Not that it was even going to theaters anyway, which is usually the thing you'd want a lower rating for in order to get a bigger audience. But still, it's ridiculous. I'm surprised it has a rating at all. It's Apple TV Plus exclusive. So many of these straight-to-streaming movies, I would imagine, wouldn't even bother getting an MPAA rating. I don't know. It's just the rated R thing was the most mind-blowing part of this. But the story, very interesting story, made me want to dig into the full true story. It also made me want to get Tetris, but I'm not going to do it. But it was a fun movie. Definitely worth a watch if you have Apple TV Plus. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Ray Taylor Show. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Tetris. Don't forget to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for more reviews on movies and TV shows. And join the conversation by leaving a comment or a rating on your favorite podcast platform or over on youtube.com/Inspired Disorder if you are watching all of these episodes I put out in video form. Until next time, enjoy the show. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at InspiredDisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at InspiredDisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.